Norman Foster once said, "As an architect, you design for the present with an awareness of the past for a future that's essentially unknown." Now, this is extremely true. Every day you can see new clothes coming out, new cars being made, new phones being designed with new and different types of technology. So, with our world constantly evolving, architecture is by no means exempt from this change either. Architecture works just like an art or literary era, where there are different art styles that define different movements in the architectural world, and we're always constantly changing these architectural eras. We're always existing in, exiting, and entering different architectural eras every day. Some of the most common or popular architectural eras that we currently exist in are known as deconstructivism, blobitecture, and green building. While architecture is an art, it also has the burden of being a science. This means that every day architecture is faced with new challenges and ways to make the way we build our buildings or create them better. This mainly revolves around different ways we can design our buildings or different materials we can use to design those buildings. With the rapid industrialization and development of our world, we have been faced with a lot of problems. Primarily, this is climate change now, and buildings stand at the forefront of this responsibility for climate change. In order to create a healthier world for the future and to face these problems, we have to be smart about the way we build our buildings, and with some careful city planning and building planning, we can create happier and healthier cities. But most people, if you ask them, wouldn't know the first thing about architecture, the way our buildings are built, because it's just typically not an extremely popular subject. In reality, architecture is a little understood, yet pivotal aspect of our lives that must adapt to our changing world in order for future prosperity. Now, there are plenty of buildings on this earth that have stood the test of time for hundreds of years, but the philosophies and the art styles that were behind these buildings are always constantly changing and have brought us the architectural styles that we build with today. The theme of breaking the mold in architecture and modern architecture has become clear. Just simply the idea of trying something new or maybe something that's a little unconventional. This is clear more than anywhere in deconstructivism. When you think of a building, you probably think of building with squares, a general amount of symmetry or straight lines and order and general function with the building. However, with deconstructivism, you can throw all of these out the window. Lots of deconstructivist buildings are built so that they look just completely different from what you would generally expect. A great example of this sort of building is Walt Disney's Concert Hall. As you can see, Walt Disney's Concert Hall really has no general symmetry to it, and all the walls are unsymmetrical and they kind of just have like swooping motions rather than building with squares or straight lines. According to Wide Walls, Walt Disney Concert Hall was designed this way in order to symbolize musical movement and the motion of sound. Up next is another type of generally unconventional form of architecture, which personally I feel like makes everything look like some weird organic alien spaceship. This is known as blobitecture, and it's exactly what it sounds like, building with blobs. The most defining feature of blobitecture is the fact that it lacks any conventional geometric shapes. Besides the occasional sphere, as you can see, these buildings don't have any general geometric shapes that you would notice or recognize. A great example of this sort of building is the Metropole Parasol in Spain. Not only does it boast a large tourist allure every year, but according to Yatzer, is the largest wooden structure in the world. The architect designed the building this way so it could look like a cluster of giant mushrooms, and it's the lack of edges or defining shape that classifies it as a blobist building. The final type of architecture I'd like to speak to you about today is less of an art style but more of a solution to a problem. With green building, you're not going to have a bunch of buildings that look similar or are necessarily built to look the same, but rather they all strive to be as green as possible. They do that. According to MENA, green buildings strive to maximize design and development efficiency, energy and water efficiency, and minimize resource impact and the building's impact on the environment. So again, it's not necessarily an art style, but rather a solution to a problem. When it comes to environmental impact, generally the first thing you'd think of as the culprit to CO2 emissions would be the transportation industry. However, according to Earth Day Network, buildings in America demand 39% of the total U.S. energy consumption, whereas the transportation industry only takes 29%. Obviously 29% is a large number, but buildings are actually the main contributor to pollution in at least the United States. Most of this energy is spent on the maintenance of these buildings, spent heating them and spent cooling them. But a building can be detrimental to its environment for its entire life cycle, from its inception to its destruction. This is mainly due to the fact that the building materials we use are extremely costly to the environment, especially concrete and steel. On a study done by the University of Massachusetts, they accounted for construction, transportation, and installation of some popular types of building materials. After it was all said and done, to go through the entire process of concrete, a kilogram of concrete, to transport it to where it needed to be, to build it, and to put it into the building, on average took 12.5 megajoules of energy. This doesn't sound like much to you, but if I told you that was the energy equivalent of blowing up 2.7 kilograms of TNT, you can obviously see that building with these materials is extremely costly. Steel, on the other hand, takes 10.5 megajoules of energy per kilogram, which is the equivalent of 2.3 kilograms of TNT. Whereas something such as wood, which is a much healthier for the environment alternative to concrete and steel, only took 2 megajoules of energy per kilogram of wood, which is only 0.4 kilograms of TNT. Now, you may be thinking, well, that sucks, but once the building's up, it's up, right? However, the demolition of these buildings can also be harmful to the environment. According to Boss Products, when you destroy a building, some waste products can include concrete, metals, glass, plastics, woods, asphalt, bricks, and more. And all of these materials just go into a landfill where they waste away rather than being reused, and it generally makes the earth look terrible. So no doubt the way we design our buildings currently is a massive drain to our earth, but with ways to redesign our buildings or to build differently, we can still have a bright outlook for the future. In order to do this, however, we must unite behind a similar cause and redefine the way we build our buildings. And this movement is known as sustainable architecture. Sustainable architecture is extremely similar to a green building, where it essentially strives to be as green as possible and to have little to no environmental footprint whatsoever. Sustainable architecture accomplishes these feats through four main ways that it does this. This includes the utilization of recycled materials, naturally regulating temperatures, renewable energy, and building with alternative materials. Up first is recycled materials. Recycled materials is a pretty simple concept in itself. It's just the idea of taking materials that were used in a previous building and destroyed, and taking those, as opposed to mining for new resources, and putting them into new buildings. This is generally better because you're going to be spent less time mining for the resources, and it's also generally less energy to recreate these materials than to create new ones. Now, the concept up next, naturally regulated temperatures, may sound like a strange or difficult concept, but chances are it's used to some extent in your own home. The idea of naturally regulated temperatures is just to, as opposed to artificially cooling or heating your home, to use the environment around you to optimize the way you heat or cool your building. This can be as simple as creating a layout in a building that has optimal airflow so that it stays as cool as possible, or painting a building the correct color so that it absorbs or reflects light properly. Now, renewable energy is obviously probably the most obvious of the ways that we can create our buildings to be more environmentally friendly. This includes using energy types such as solar power, wind power, geothermal power, and hydroelectric power, amongst others. But another way we can also reuse the energy and the things we use in our buildings is by catching rainwater or filtering your water so that you're not wasting as much water in your home. The final type of, or a way that we can reduce the environmental impact of our buildings is through building with alternative materials. This can help to eliminate the large costs of the building materials that we previously used with building materials that aren't as environmentally, don't impact the environment as much and are just generally healthier for the environment. The first one I'd like to talk to you about is straw bales. Now, I'm aware of the concept that we're not living in the medieval era, but when straw bales are used correctly, they can make an excellent frame for a home. So, straw bales, as I said, when used correctly, provide us both an excellent insulator, and when framed correctly, straw bales can be a perfectly reasonable wall to a home. Up next is a little bit of an unconventional sort of approach known as, this is an alternative to concrete, known as hempcrete. Hempcrete is created from the fibers of a hemp tree and limestone, and the main advantage of hempcrete is that it is much, much lighter than traditional concrete, so that means you're going to be spending less energy transporting it and installing it where you need to. And the final type of alternative material is bamboo, which according to Newsweek.com has better tensile strength than steel and better compressive strength than concrete. Now, not only is bamboo more structurally sound than the traditional materials we build with, but bamboo is also extremely light, and bamboo can grow extremely quickly. So it's a perfectly reasonable building material that we could create things with. Despite not being common knowledge, the world of architecture faces problems affecting us all that must be solved in order to ensure a healthy planet. The different ways we design our buildings, such as deconstructivism, blobbertecture, and green building, are all just great examples of the way we possess our human ingenuity and our capacity to critically think and to be creative. However, in recent days, we have become lazy and started to cut corners and have just had a lack of consideration for the environment when we design our buildings, and that has led to the climate change we are faced with today. Our buildings serve inefficiency and waste, rather than work in harmony with the environment and have as small of a footprint as possible. However, if we can start uniting with sustainable architecture and recycle our materials, use naturally regulated temperatures, renewable energy, or build with alternative materials, we can find a way to create a healthier building atmosphere for our environment. Norman Foster said we cannot design for the future, and he's absolutely correct. Tomorrow will always bring challenges that we may not anticipate now and we may not know how to solve now. But our critical thinking and our capacity to solve problems allows us to stay optimistic for tomorrow, where we can face the challenges and solve them. Maybe we will never be able to know the future, but at least we can hope for the future.